I'm Justin Mott, and welcome to my home here in Hanoi, Vietnam. And today I'm going to break down a recent commercial photo shoot I did for Restoration Hardware down in Saigon. I'll walk you through the gear that I used, a lot of Leica gear, some you might expect, some maybe not. I'll tell you how the shoot unfolded from start to finish, and I'll share some of my favorite images from the day. But before we dive in, I just want to thank today's sponsor, which is my online store, AskMott.com. I've got presets, I've got workshops, group workshops. I also do custom workshops for anyone to come to Vietnam and learn with me one-on-one. I also can give you a quote for anywhere in the world. And I've also got my online mentoring open to all levels of photographers interested in all genres of photography. You can check all that out and more at askmott.com. So let's start with how a photo shoot like this will typically unfold. I've been in touch with their creative department for many years, almost like over 5 years now, but the timing has never seemed to work out for a shoot. I've always been busy and the schedules just didn't line up. And honestly, this shoot almost didn't happen either. I had just returned to Vietnam from a trip to the US to see my family, and right when I got back, I got the call. They needed me to shoot the next day down in Saigon, about a 2-hour flight from Hanoi. I was back here in Hanoi, like just walking back into my construction site here. I was exhausted, I was jet lagged, and honestly not in the mood to jump straight into a shoot. But here's the thing, RH is a potentially big client. I've wanted to work with them for a long time. They pay well, and the brief sounded interesting. All recipes for something I want to do. So even though it was going to be a bit of a whirlwind to make it happen and a bit rushed, I decided to just go for it. And luckily for me, I have a team behind me that can support me because I run a production company with my wife. So like normally commercial shoots of this magnitude, they're planned like months ahead of time with a lot of calls and emails and prep and just talking over the creative brief and guidelines and kind of a lot of stuff. Not always necessary, but some of it's still necessary. But this one was more like an editorial shoot. Like I got a brief by email, said, are you available? This is the shoot. This is what we want. This is when we need it done by. They told me the rate, and it was a good rate. Like a lot better than most editorial rates. Most editorial rates pay you like $500 a day on the high end, or sometimes 1,000, but this is a lot more than that. I'm not going to give exactly the amount. Let's just say significantly more than that. And as it should be, as a photographer, when your work is being used to promote a brand of that magnitude, or any brand really commercially, you should be compensated more for it. So once I agreed about the rate, agreed to take on the shoot, I was introduced to the subject I was going to be photographing, and 24 hours later, I was on a plane to Saigon. So if you're not familiar with Restoration Hardware, they make furniture. They're a giant furniture brand out of the US. Brief was a portrait of one of their suppliers, who's an Indian marble artisan named Vivek, whose company sources marble from the world's finest quarries. He creates tables and marble and furniture for Restoration Hardware. And so the brief was profile him, get some nice portraits of him, and this was going to be published in their print catalog. They only do a few a year, and they go out to a ton of homes worldwide. So the focus here, the priority shot, was a portrait of Vivek, but I also needed to capture some shots of him in action, inspecting the marble, overseeing his team, sort of going through the factory, interacting with his brother, who's also his partner in the business. And the idea was to have a balance of posed and sort of documentary style shots. So once I know the brief, I start dialing in my kit for the shoot, and I start putting together my gear list, what bags, what lenses, and what cameras. So the client wasn't doing a billboard here. Remember, it was just for a catalog. So they didn't need like super high resolution, but some clients still want that even if they don't necessarily need it. So typically what I'll do is I'll ask them if they have any guidelines, any specs, any requirements, and if they don't, then I at least back myself up by saying like, hey, listen, I have this Sony 60 megapixel camera, but I'd like to use my Leica SL2S here. It's a 24 megapixel camera. I like the lenses. I like the sensor in low light. Is that okay? So I asked them quickly. I don't typically bother them a lot with gear stuff. I just want to know what their requirements are, and I quickly explain what I like and why I like it. And if they know how to talk the language, they get back to me. So the client was like, yeah, that's totally fine. You can use that kit, no issues. For lenses, I went with a set of Leica M Prime lenses. I went with my trusty 35 and 50 Summilux lens. I also recently purchased a 75 millimeter Voigtlander Nocturne lens, and I brought that as well. And I thought those would cover me perfect for the portraits that I had to do. I like that quality of 1.4. I like the separation I'm gonna get at 1.4, but I also brought my Leica SL 24-90, and I'm not normally a big zoom guy, but this lens is quite different. It covers a lot of range, it gives me flexibility, and I still love the image quality. It's not quite the separation you're gonna get at 1.4, not quite that pop you're gonna get, but I knew, just in case something went wrong with one of my prime lenses, I'd be covered. If I had to shoot documentary, or if he was uncomfortable, or if things were just happening fast, which happens even if you plan, And even if people agree things can happen fast, I knew this would give me a nice variety of shots. Plus, it's a new client, so I wanted to get a variety of images just to please them because I don't know yet what they like. That will be dialed in. The more I work with them, the more familiar I get with them, and the more familiar they get with my work as well. So for lighting, I hired a local team in Saigon. It saved me from hauling my gear down there, flying with all that stuff, and flying with my assistant. Although I love working with my assistant because he knows me quite well. And I know this was going to be mostly natural light, but I like to and need to have a light kit on standby just in case. It could rain all day. I mean, I'm going to try to use side light as much as possible, but it could rain. The light might not be as good as I saw in the scouting pictures. I did have the subject send me some pictures so I get a feel for what's there, but I basically just got like a basic lighting kit with one powerful 600-watt light to mimic the sun, a couple other small lights, and a few modifiers just in case. But again, overall, I was going to try to shoot with natural light. That's what I like, and that's what the client was looking for as well. So I packed all my gear. I picked up a new Shimoda roller bag. I just talked about that on a new episode of gear I picked up in the US. Love that roller bag. Pack that up with all my gear. Commercial shoots, I like roller bags just because I can work out of them, and I tend to carry a little bit more gear. I don't want to have that on my shoulder all day. And plus, in factories, they just work well. They're more durable. I feel more secure in my gear. And that bag is fantastic. Check it out. I have no affiliation with them, but it's a great bag. And I should mention, as a backup camera, I did also bring my Leica M10D. That's just like my in case of emergency. Use this camera. I'm comfortable with it, even though it doesn't have a screen. But if something went wrong with my SL2S, I can still finish the shoot. It's not going to be as easy not being able to see the screen, but I feel very comfortable with the camera, so no problems there. So I have my Leica SL2S, 3 prime lenses, 1 zoom lens, and my Leica M10D. So I flew out at about 6 a.m., which meant I had to be up at 4 a.m., out the door by 4:30 to make it to the airport. I like to just slam an espresso before I go anywhere in the morning. I landed in Ho Chi Minh City around 8:30 a.m. I went straight to the factory. I met Vivek. I met his brother. Both super cool guys. They offered me espresso as soon as I arrived, and then we just hit it off because of that. Nice guys. Offered me a coffee is the path to my heart and a path to my friendships. So met them quickly at the factory, and we just kind of dive right in. I met the lighting team briefly. I hadn't worked with them before. This was all last minute, so I didn't get to use my normal team. I explained my workflow. I showed them where to set up the lighting, where to put their stuff. I told them kind of what I was looking for, and then I took a quick tour of the factory just to get a sense of what's going on there, what kind of like documentary style shots I'm gonna get, and then we're sort of planning out the portrait location. Throughout this whole process, the RH creative team started a WhatsApp group, and they were feeding me info in real time from the US. I was sending them test shots, just using my iPhone and showing them the back of my camera what I had in mind, talking to their creative director to get a feel for what he had in mind, and the backdrop they envisioned, the lighting. It all just kind of came together. It was nice. I bounced a couple ideas off of him. This is funny because you just meet these people right then. I'm just like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. I like people that are just direct, no nonsense. You don't have to. I don't have an ego. I do, but I'm not fragile, you know. So I was like, here's what I'm thinking. I like this. Here's a couple other options. You know, started shooting through the tables, trying to set things up a little bit like that. He didn't like shots like through things. So I'm like, how dare you? That's like my move. That was fine as well. He wanted something a little bit cleaner. Had to have him for the portrait. It was a double truck spread, so he either had to be left aligned or right aligned, not right in the middle. It's gonna fold open. And they already had sort of a set picked out with all of the marble in the background. Now, marble is really heavy and really big, so everything, anytime I wanted to move something, it was an ordeal. I mean, they had cranes picking things up. So you might think like a couple hours to shoot is a long time. Like, not really when you actually have to take giant piece of marble, move it here, take that, move it here. I'm always tempted to move things myself just because it's easier, but got a bad lower back as I'm getting older and I didn't want to risk it. So Vivek and his team moved things around. We adjusted things, got things dialed in quickly. The creative director seemed happy with what I was shooting, and they signed off for the night before I actually started shooting. We had a big garage door to the right, which was letting in some natural light, not direct sunlight, but just some light coming in. So we're gonna play around with some natural light, some shots with just a giant softbox, and some with the factory lights on, some of them off. Just playing around with a nice mix of things. So again, like I've just started working with this team. I like the natural light stuff, but I don't know if they're gonna like it as much. So I just wanted to have a nice balance. So I got the shot that I knew that they really liked, the shot that they envisioned. They actually gave me a mock-up in AI, and it's really scary how good it was and how similar it was to what I got. Like he did a mock-up based on some pictures and put together an AI spread. I'm like, I was so confused. I'm like, how do you already have the shot that I'm gonna get? So that was helpful, but also kind of weird and confusing because I was just thinking about the future of what we do. But that's a story for another time. And then also I noticed something like, oh, the marble's a way different color when you wet it. So we did a bunch of shots with the dry marble, and then we did a bunch of shots with the wet marble where the color really shines through. I mean, these things are happening fast. I'm learning about marble on the spot, learning about what these guys do on the spot, meeting them on the spot, and then working with a new team on the spot from the US. I mean, that's what they hire you to do. I'm not complaining. That's what I do, and I think I do it pretty well, and that's why I hope they hire me. But just giving you guys some insight into sort of how it all unfolds and how quickly it happens. So shooting Vivek, he's a handsome guy, but he was also a little bit shy and like a little bit serious in front of the camera. So it took some time to get the right expression. So using manual focus, I had to be patient and wait for that perfect moment. So I did switch a little bit between my 75, my 50, and then sometimes I was actually using autofocus with the 24 to 90 just because he wasn't giving me like the smile that I needed, the look that I needed. I wanted somewhere in between like serious and laughing, but he was like too serious. And it's fine, and it's not his fault. It's my job to make him feel comfortable. So, I was just trying to capture that moment, but he would only give it for a sec. So I usually settle when I can't get the expression I want, I usually sort of settle or start with just sort of like a closed mouth smirk, like one of these, like a little bit like that. Not like some people when they smile like too teethy or it's just too forced or it's too contrived. But I found the right groove. I found the right expression. Then once I got that expression, I just milked it and tried different compositions. Got close, shot through some of the hooks. I really work a scene. Once I've got the light dialed in and the subject comfortable, that's where I go nuts. Like I'm getting close, I'm getting far back, I'm shooting through things. So once we were done with the portraits, we took a lunch break, got to know the guys a little bit better, and then I spent the rest of the day capturing Vivek in action, working with the team, inspecting marble, overseeing the production process. I try for these shots not to have it too staged. I might like just tell them where to hang out and work for something like this. For commercial work, I find that editorial balance. I might say like, hey, I like that area by the light over there where they're doing this process or this part of the marble. Might be the light, might be the action. Hopefully it's a combination of both. Then I'll just say like, can you just go over there and interact? And that's what he did. And it was great. He was very natural with that. So interacting, inspecting, talking to people, looking for little moments there. Again, all these shots trying to support the portrait that I took and just sort of tell this overall story about him and the marble and the whole entire craft, about what he does and his dedication, his passion for this. So for that, I used mostly the 24 to 90 because things were happening quickly. I did like to have autofocus in that situation. I did like to have that range of being able to get up close, to pull back. And we were a little bit pressed for time because that night I had to file. So I finished up for the day, got the shots I needed, got a nice variety, went back to my hotel, grabbed a shower. I was just covered in like dust and sweat just because it is a working factory. While I was taking a shower, loaded in the images, backed them up in 2 locations, picked out my favorite. I picked about maybe like 80 pictures just because a huge variety. And I toned them lightly. And what I did is upload low res pictures, and their turnaround time was so quick. They needed it that night. That night for me was their morning. So like I'd filed the pictures at probably like 6 or 7. As they were waking up, I'm starting to get feedback just as I'm trying to go to bed. Like, okay, want these raw files. So uploaded the raws that they liked, and they had like by the next afternoon, they already had the design layout completely done. They seem really happy. I don't aim to just like satisfy, I aim to impress, and I feel like I did. They were really complimentary about the work. They're really nice. But yeah, it was a rush shoot. It was a fun shoot. This is kind of how I like it. This is what I've sort of fallen into at this point in my life, is these sort of editorial style shoots, like very natural, be able to tell a story with a series of images, but for a commercial client, which means better money, so you feel a little bit more appreciated for your work. I still like doing journalism, just don't love the compensation for it. So I try to strike that balance now in my career, and luckily for me, I've sort of found that balance, and I've got a lot more opportunities to do this type of work for really big brands that are doing interesting things, and I can still take creative photographs, or what I think are creative photographs. So here are some of my favorite pictures from the day. Thank you to Restoration Hardware. Thank you to Vivek and his entire team. I had a lot of fun that day. I learned a lot. It's a fun assignment. I really liked it. So that's all for today, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions about my process, about my kit, or anything that I mentioned during this episode, ask me in the comment section. I do my best to respond to everyone. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to have a wonderful day. Also, don't forget to check out my online store at askmott.com.